You are not completely wrong. The fact is that high life has evolved. There was definitely a new high life revolution that came on the wings of the Afrobeats movement. Now, if you look at guys like Fino, if you look at guys like the late MC Love, if you look at guys even Flavor, right, and even there's a group of young artists, I think Show Them Camp, right? Many of them have actually gone back to recover the high life template and reproduce using the new digital format that is what sells today. So the question is, why has high life evolved? I would think that in the template that these guys have laid down, they have actually embodied what could be the high life evolution. So where you're partially correct is in the sense that high life started to die from the late 1960s, which is why Rex Lawson went to London and came back threatening to kick soul music, which had now driven high life into the doldrums. In fact, his last album was about fighting high life and it was more funky, it was more driven. So yes, it stagnated, but there was definitely a renaissance about between the 5 to 10 years past.
Okay, I'm happy to hear that. Just a little thing that struck me when Tony was talking. Why did ECN have a band? You know, you can understand the police having a band, the Navy having a band, and in those days it seems all large companies had their own little bands.
Yeah, because it was basically for recreation. It's the same reason why most large organizations had football teams. They had recreational sports clubs. Okay. Like the railway had a sports club, and in fact, this railway team became the most successful in Nigerian FA Cup history. And the thing is, the staff needed to be entertained. It was part of staff welfare. So bands were part of the template. In fact, ECN had a great football team, which I used to support in the early 70s.
Yes.
So yeah, it was all about recreation, and clearly it started out with big band, swing jazz events, you know, at Rex Club, at the Abalabi Club, and so on, such places, and the Yoruba Tennis Club, and eventually many of them actually had their own venues. So yeah, it was about recreation and welfare, really.
As Africans, drums is what we understand. Drums are what we use in recreation, in leisure, in funerals, in parties, to pass messages. And I thought what he was saying was a very deep comment. I'd like you to know your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I mean, just a bit about Tony and Tony's body of work. Now, there are very few people here who ever actually saw Tony play in his heyday. I did not see him play, even though I was alive then. Tony was a phenomenon, you know, and he drove the band. There was a track playing, you know, there. We know obviously it's lost in a whole maelstrom of activity. Osima Torokorote, you know, it was a funk-driven tune, and because obviously funk is West African in origin, even though it traveled to America and came back. Now, the origins of what Tony could drive a dance floor. Tony was like Rex Lawson's partner in crime. You know, Rex could rely on him to drive the rhythm section. It's not like nowadays we have the trap drums, European trap drums. Back then, Tony was a drummer. There were no trap drums until much later. I think just about around the end of the Civil War, they started using trap drums. And the thing is, you had to drive the groove because it was a competitive business. Musicians did not earn a lot, you know, and there were lots of bands fighting for a small audience. So you had to drive the audience, and it was about dancing and entertainment. So the drummer was the heartbeat, and it is not, you know, it's not per chance because I just want to say a few things. These documentaries I do are not meant to be huge technical works of art. There are things that, as an historian, I simply do to document and to highlight. We do not attempt to win technical awards. I will not. But the point is this, right? Stories like this, about people like this, drivers like this.
They need to be told.
They need to be told. And if nobody's going to do it, I will do it. I will spend my money and my time. It may not be Miss World or the Blue Ribbon, but what you will see here is that what we've tried to do is to highlight a story. You may never have heard of Tony Odili, but Tony Odili was one of the most influential musicians in the history of this country. You could not have played for Rex Lawson, Roy Chicago, Victor Laya, and so many others, and drive their music in the way this man did, and you don't hear about him. That is why we have to highlight his story. So Tony was a phenomenon, you know, and it is not perchance that Tony actually learned his craft in the village. Learned from the originals, learned from the people who actually, you know, the age-old, ancient custodians of the tradition of the drums. So it is not perchance. So I mean, you know, I don't know if I think I've probably gone overboard, but it is important to explain why what his role was is important in musical history.
Because your last comment actually brings me to my next question. Again, in that early segment, he talks about when he was playing, okay, that the juju, i.e. the masquerades, would come out,
Yes.
and the women would come out. I found that interesting because in this part of the world, the women and the masquerades don't generally tend to be dancing at the same time. It generally tends to be men.
Yes.
So I thought that was an interesting aspect of a culture I didn't know about. I'd like you to talk about that.
Okay, just to clarify, he was referring in the first instance to the Gridai, the old drummer, the great drummer, Ishakiri drummer in Warri in the 1940s, 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s. Yes, but I need to clarify that even as I am a custodian of tradition, you know, and I will tell you that in certain communities, the masquerades and the women can be seen to dance at the same venue, but it depends on the kind of masquerade. There's certain kind of masquerades that women cannot dance with. There's certain kind of masquerades that women, you know, can dance in the same arena as them as part of the sequence. So it's actually relative. There are certain ones that no one should actually be seen out. It's like Uru.
Exactly.
You don't come out when Uru, no matter who you are, no matter how much money you have, when the Uru is out, you stay inside your house.
Absolutely.
But the thing is, there's certain when Egungun is outside, you know, obviously you can, clearly there are barriers of interaction, but there's still some level of interaction. You can stay in the same space. So it's relative to the type of masquerade, you know, and I think that was the underlying story there.
Yes, I thought that was actually a very interesting part. And then another thing I thought that was interesting, we spoke about technical awards for the film, but I thought that it was interesting that from when he's talking about his birth to about 1950s, it's in black and white.
Yes.
And then when he's talking from the 1960s, 70s, after the Bobby Benton times, it now becomes into color. I thought that was a very nice touch.
Yeah, it was my co-executive, it was her idea, because me, I'm very linear. My own is everything is in a straight line. She's the creative one that says, why don't we do it like this and like that, you know? So yeah, I would give, it was her idea, not mine.
It was very effective because I thought that since you didn't have the original footage of him as a child, it placed it at a time so that we could see his sort of almost using the film as a method to show the transitions.
I just want to point out something about, listen, you know, anyone who is in this space will tell you that if I could not get archival footage of Rex Lawson and contemporary footage of the time, I don't know who can, because I've spent the last 20 years looking for it, you know, and it was like pulling teeth out of the mouth of a dinosaur to get archival footage of a particular period in Nigerian history, and I think it's an absolute disgrace. But then look, there are reasons for that, you know, apart from the sheer carelessness that we know. Tony's case, now, Tony had a photograph of himself as a child, which I called from a larger photograph of the family, which is the only remaining photograph. Now, you know, he lived in Port Harcourt. He was from Abo and Ndoni in the Rivers and Delta states. And
Where's Abo?
Abo is in Delta State. It's actually the what they call the old Bendelibo, as they call them, in a part of the Delta State. But his mother is from Ndoni, which is kind of like at the riverine coast between River State and Delta State. Now he lost all memories, all photographs. Like I have no photograph of myself as a child, not one. You know, I mean, when I said as a baby, nothing before 1968, when we came back to Lagos, nothing, because people lost everything.
That's because of the war.
Sorry?
That's because of the war.
Because of the war. So a lot of people lost memories. There's a whole memory vacuum, which someone like Tony, obviously much older than myself, and much older than my father, in fact, well, a few years older than my father, you know, they lost it.
Would have lost more as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something we don't really talk about, that there are two sets of memories.
Yes.
There's the physical memories that are now lost of happier times.
Yes.
And then there's the memories of unhappy times that are in fact not documented anyway.
Yes.
Which was in the film we saw yesterday, Afia attack.
Yes.
So those are unhappy memories that are not documented, and then there are happy memories which were documented that have now been lost. You want to talk about that dichotomy?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is this, right? The one is off. Well, I mean, certainly the mental memories are often triggered by the physical reminders that you have. You know, for certain, you know, we take these physical reminders, these artifacts of our past, for granted. You know, now we've got camera phones that document everything, including the jollof rice we ate for lunch. But at the time, you wanted to document memories, you needed to call a photographer with a camera to document these things. And it cost money, and we valued them a lot more than we do the memories we have now. And the thing is that, for some reason, something happened to us in a period between the end of the war and 1990, I would say, that caused us to begin to almost despise memory. This is a general comment, but a lot of people seem to, whatever traumas we went through, you're going through the preparations of Joe, But then, as you get older, like I'm at the age now where I actually treasure memory more, because a lot of what drives me today is memory of a better time, memory of, the reminders I give myself of what I want to be at this time. I'm suddenly going back and saying, hey, how far? That kind of thing. But then you find that period between 1970 and 1990, we seem to have a volition to destroy memory, both at an institutional level and sometimes at a deeply personal level.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to open it up to the audience. Comments? Okay, there's a person over there.
Ed, thanks for a very great documentary. My question was around, I noticed that there were several times during the interview where he would talk about these really exciting anecdotes, and he would say, it was a very sad and tragic time. But it wasn't entirely believable, because it seemed like there was a certain level of contentment. A lot of these musicians back at the time didn't seem to have very much. But there was a certain level of satisfaction that they got from playing music and entertaining people. And, times he'd make comments about eating Gary and Ekba, and, it seemed like many of them lived in poverty, or at least they weren't very economically well off. So I'm wondering, and listening to what he said at the end, where he said he needed help, I find it a bit tragic that a lot of the people who created this wealth of music, this foundation of music that we have, that somehow they've been forgotten or they've been abandoned. I was just wondering whether you got a sense of how their economic well-being sort of intertwined with the music they played, and whether it is something that we miss today in our society, particularly when we look at musicians who aspire. I wondered whether you could comment to that.
Certainly. I mean, there is no question that musicians... Yes, musicians of a particular era, the era like for the first generation of musicians, I would say, between these modern musicians, between 1920 and 1950, they certainly had a greater contentment that was not based on an artistic and creative contentment that was not aligned with financial wealth. There's no question about it, because you couldn't really earn money as a musician. You didn't have a reputation as a musician, so you clearly had to love what you were doing, and they definitely did. They were always secure, because there was always somebody who was moved by this that gave them a place to stay, and some small money to eat with, and they were happy with a roof over their heads and a place to play their music. Clearly, the template has changed today. Music is a business. Music is a business nowadays. Lots of, and there's no question about it. Musicians nowadays are a lot more savvy, a lot more cutthroat, as they should be, because it is a profession. So there is definitely a disconnect there's a generational disconnect between musicians of the past and musicians of today. I mean, there is no question that there's a very high mortality rate in musicians there's definitely a high mortality rate based on the fact that they did not plan. A lot of those guys did not make plans. You know what I mean? There was no forward planning, there was no institution. So it is a tragedy. I mean, this guy is hanging on by his fingernails. He will play all kinds. I mean, I try to give him work that earns him reasonable money, and others do try. But at the age of 89, he's still struggling. He's still trying to survive. So that is a reality. I think he embodies the reality, and I think the fact that he's still alive, in spite of all, is a miracle.
Thank you.
Dami Ajayi.
Dami Ajayi, and then the man over there, and then I can't take any more who I had asked for. Okay. Dami Ajayi, and then, yes, and then there was another gentleman over there, and then I'm not allowed to ask anymore.
Thank you very much for this documentary. I came all the way to watch it. I mean,
Thank you, man. Thank you.
I'm very interested in Rex Lawson and all. And I found it very interesting that, Rex Lawson had a drummer called Tony Allen, and Tony Audley, and Fela also had a drummer, Of course, I wish that Tony Audley had been more well off. But talking about the archival stuff you spoke about, I know that there's no living or any video footage of Rex Lawson at all. What happened to the concert in London? Why wasn't that filmed? And also still talking about archives, I remember also that Fela did a film called Black President, which the archives or whatever, the footage of that film is still lost to date. How do you think it's possible for us to find these things? I mean, they are important stuff now to us, I mean, to our heritage and whatever. How do you think we can find it? I mean, I'm sure you're doing the work already, but I'd just like for you to highlight the difficulties that you've been facing and where you see breakthrough coming from. And then also, when are you going to do Rex Lawson documentary? Because in a way, we're talking about Tony Odili, but there's no way you can talk about Tony Odili without, I mean, we spend most of the time talking about Rex Lawson essentially. And I think that it's long overdue. I mean, because many people around here do not even know who Rex Lawson is. I mean, my siblings are here, and the only Rex Lawson they know is because I listen to it all the time. And when I came here, it was like I was forcing them to come here, but I'm happy that at least they had some good time and learned a few things. Thank you.
Thanks, I mean, I'll just answer your questions quickly in rapid succession. One, about the archives. Well, the fact is this, right? The London show, because it was organized by the Ijaw Students Union and the West African, the Ghanaian students, they were photographers, but I don't believe there was actually any video camera footage. There were photographs of it. The photographs are out there, but there's no video footage of it. Now, Rex Lawson played on TV, and the question is, it is there. One reel tape is lying somewhere under mildew or whatever. We just have to find it. Look, this work, it's not like you can use meta tags and find these things in a room full of dusty archives. When I found the Nzogu high jump thing, I spent 2.5 hours watching CBCA, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation tapes of the Empire Games. Fell asleep, woke up, started again. And the jump was about 5 or 6 seconds in a 240-minute tape. So there is no substitute for the hard graft that involves your back and neck and money. Because a lot of this archive, because the thing is that I'm sure if it was a question of money, people would have bought it. But it takes money to actually to look for these things. So it's just down to the hard work. And hopefully we'll get lucky. Doctor Who tapes were found in Jos. The BBC didn't have them. So luck, hard work, providence, money, who knows? But effort is what it takes.
Thank you. And then the gentleman at the back who I'd asked for.
Thank you for what you're doing, sir. The man mentioned where the Rex Lawson died, Uronigbe. Yes. Uronigbe is my town. Wow. And what we heard about his death was not that he died in the accident. So I want to be sure. Did he die in that accident?
He died in that accident. There was no question about it. It's not subject to any kind of question. He died on the spot. He had severe head injuries. He had severe head injuries. And in fact, what is not on here, because a lot of this was abridged. It was a 2.5 hour interview. But because I had limitations on time because of the production, this even was not meant the what I was meant to be screening. He definitely died there. He definitely died.
In the accident?
Yes. Yes.
He died in the accident?
He died in the accident.
Was Odili there?
Sorry?
When he died?
Sorry? I don't get you. I'm sorry, I didn't get your last question.
What I want to know is if Rex Lawson died in that accident.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Can I ask you, sir? Do you mind sharing with us the account, the contrary account? Educate me, because I was not there to Uronigbe that day.
1 minute, please.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's me they're going to shoot. Ed is the superstar.
I'm sorry, since you said, I didn't want to, I just wanted to be sure. We had another story, that though there was an accident, but he went into the bush around there to ease himself, and he was killed by a snake.
No, unless the snake gave him head injuries, which is what he died from. No, but I mean, listen, I appreciate the perspective, but he definitely died from the head injuries. That is for certain. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Round of applause for Ed. Thank you.